Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Dr. Brown and I serve as DCR's Social Equity Program Director. Today's webinar is the first in a series of Seed Grant Lunch and Learn webinars. It is our goal to assist qualified applicants in the completion of their grant application and ultimately receive financial grant assistance. First, I'd like to introduce the Social Equity team, who I am really proud to work with. They have been working tirelessly in partnership with Elevate Impact LA to administer and manage this program. Allison Toll, Catherine Smith-Ball, and Ethan Spalding. I'd also like to introduce DCR's General Manager, Kat Packer, who will welcome you and say a few words. Director Packer?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you to all of the attendees who are joining this afternoon's Lunch and Learn program regarding the SEED grant. We're very, very excited about this program and the opportunity to provide direct financial assistance to social equity applicants. We recognize that capital is a huge barrier to entry, and so we want to be able to disperse these funds as quickly as possible and to allow these funds to have the broadest impact. So we are here to provide resources and tools to the community and social equity applicants to assist them through that process. Please feel free to use functions available in today's webinar to ask any questions that you have. We will be collecting questions and putting together a resource so that we can have a frequently asked questions document online. But again, through these SEED grant lunch and learn webinars, we're hoping to provide step-by-step assistance to help you complete this application process. I do want to thank Dr. Brown and your leadership and the team from Elevate Impact LA for the development and implementation of this program, and we're very excited for today's Lunch and Learn. So I'll turn things back over to you, Dr. Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Packer. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, the SEED grant program is utilizing funding from the 2019-2020 Cannabis Equity Grant for Local Jurisdiction, or the CEG grant. Now, this is to provide financial assistance to verified social equity individual applicants. In June of 2020, DCR selected Elevate Impact LA to administer the financial grant program. And then in 2021, in April, the City of Los Angeles established the Social Equity Entrepreneur Development Grant, better known as SEED. To date, the City of Los Angeles has dedicated $6 million towards the SEED grant. $5 million of the dollars are available for SEED Grant 1.0, and $1 million is available for SEED Grant 2.0. Next slide. SEED 1.0 will utilize $5 million of the $6 million of the CEG funding to provide grants of $25,000 to all Phase 3 Retail Round 1 social equity individual applicants. Now, all Phase 3 Retail Round 1 applicants have been sent emails notifying them that they are eligible for the $25,000 in grant assistance. Notifications were emailed to the addresses associated with your Excel account. All who have registered for today's Lunch and Learn were sent the 4 grant application assessment documents that are needed for the application. Next slide, please. Now, SEED 2.0 will utilize $1 million of the $6 million to provide grants up to $10,000 to verified social equity individual applicants. This $10,000, will be distributed in 2 disbursements. Applicants who are eligible to receive the first $5,000 disbursement will get this disbursement when the Department of Cannabis Regulation approves their pre-application for further processing. And the second disbursement will go to folks who have reached the milestone that deems them eligible for a notice of local compliance underway. Now, all applicants deemed eligible for further processing and who have received their notice of local compliance underway have also been sent emails notifying them that they're eligible for the 5 and/or the 10K in financial grant assistance. Notifications were emailed to the addresses associated with your Excella account. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of grant disbursement, seed grant applicants must apply by August 18th of 2021. The seed grant funds are all seed grant funds that are not dispersed by 90 days prior to the end of the city's CEG grant contract may be dispersed on a pro rata basis to eligible recipients who have applied by August 18th. Please keep in mind that's a very important date for everybody to have applied by August 18th. Also to note, applicants who receive funds under the 1.0 grant are not eligible for the 2.0, and applicants who received grant funds under the 2.0 are not eligible to receive grants under the 1.0. Now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Paula Groves, who is the CEO of the Elevate Impact LA team and the project manager responsible for administering the seed grant. Ms. Groves will introduce her team and then walk you through the seed grant application step by step. You will have an opportunity to ask questions as she goes through the application. We will ask you to submit your questions through the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. And we will answer as many questions as time permits. Now, all questions and answers will be uploaded onto our DCR website. And for those who registered, you should have received the 4 assessment documents that she's going to work with you on. You can fill them out while Ms. Groves is walking you through each document. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Groves.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, and thank you, Director Packer. It's an honor to be working with the City of LA to help you provide grant funding to your verified social equity entrepreneurs. By way of background, we began dispersing loans and grants to verified equity entrepreneurs back in 2018, working with the City of Oakland. We are now also working with the City of Sacramento, the County of Mendocino, as well as the City of Los Angeles. And we are proud to be able to work with all of you. Our goal is to not only provide you with grant funding, but to also provide you with whatever support you need to help build a successful business. On this slide, we've summarized for you the members of the team that are working in LA today. We have Laura Herrera, Tiffany McBride, Bruce Robinson. Those are our 3 underwriters. And then we also have Stacy Brennan-Gray, who is our customer relations database manager. So I hope that you all get a chance to meet one, if not all, of the team members during your journey through getting a grant with the City of Los Angeles. Next slide, please. So what I'd like to walk you through now is the grant disbursement process. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the assessment documents that you will be required to submit as a part of the process. Next slide, please. So the grant disbursement process is a 6-step process. Step 1 is the application online. Step 2 is the application review. Step 3 is the grant approval. Step 4 is the virtual signing. Step 5 is the grant disbursement. And step 6 is the post-grant data tracking. So let's start with step 1. First of all, applicants will be required to complete an online application. Paper applications will not be accepted. In addition, in order to verify that an applicant is indeed a verified social equity individual, the applicant will need to input their Excella number issued by the City of Los Angeles onto the application. We know that many of you are wondering how to locate your Excella number. Well, there's a video on the LA Cannabis website on the video tutorials page, which will walk you through how to find your Excella number for the application. Next slide, please. So this is a slide which summarizes for you the different videos that you can find on the City of Los Angeles page. One is to find information about the seed grant program. The second one is the seed grant program assessment documents. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail about those documents today. And 3, there's a step-by-step tutorial on how to apply for the seed grant program. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us and we can point you to the direction of where these tutorials can be located. Next slide, please. So the next thing we'd like to talk you through is the application process. What we'd like you to do is to sign in online and create an account. As a part of the process, you will be uploading not only your application, but 4 assessment documents. The documents include the written narrative of how the funds will be used, the budget or a line item list of expenditures for the requested grant amount, a business executive summary, and monthly expense projections. We're going to talk about each of these assessment documents in further detail during this seminar and allow you to ask questions so that you can make sure that you have the right information to complete the documents. Our goal is to make sure that we make this grant application process as easy as possible and as fast as possible, because we know as entrepreneurs, time is money, right? And so we want to make sure you have the support that you need. We don't anticipate that you will be required to work with a consultant. If you have questions about the specific documents that you're working with, our team of underwriters that I've just walked you through on the previous slide are on hand to help you complete these documents. So please, we're here to support you in getting the funding so that you can grow your business. Next slide, please. So the 1.0 app, this is a screenshot of the Seed 1.0 application. It is found on our website at elevateimpactla.com. And this is a screenshot of what that application looks like. Next slide, please. So step 2, the application review process. Once a completed application has been received, the Elevate Impact staff will review the application for completeness. If anything has been missed, the applicant will receive an email requesting the missed information. We will also be available by phone to help you if the applicant has any questions. If an application is complete, it will then be assessed by the Elevate Impact Committee. The next few slides will walk us through the assessment process, but note, this is very important. If an applicant does not submit a completed application, or if we deem that your application is missing content, we will contact you. The Elevate Impact team is on standby to help you improve your application, and you can then resubmit your application. And just to let you know, in all of the other cities that we've worked with, an application has never been denied. Next slide, please. Application review process continued. So the grant application is reviewed by the Elevate Impact staff, as I just mentioned. Once an application has been assessed, an email is sent saying that the application has been approved and the grant documents will be prepared. And then if applicants are not approved on the first go round, they are coached on how to improve their application, and they can then resubmit their grant application. Next slide, please. So in addition to the online application, we do require that you upload some assessment documents. These documents include the budget narrative of how funds will be used, the budget or line item list of expenditures for the requested budget amount, a business executive summary of 3 to 5 pages, and also monthly expense projections for a 12-month period. And we're going to talk next in more detail about each one of these documents and what we expect to see when you upload them to your application. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot of all of the different assessment documents that we're going to walk through at this stage in our presentation. We will also stop after each one of these documents has been explained and let you ask questions about each specific document. And also we'll give you an opportunity to write down some answers based upon what you're learning in this seminar. As Dr. Brown mentioned, we sent each one of these assessment documents to you when you registered for the webinar. And so please feel free to take out those documents now and write down some notes as we're going through each one in detail, and write down your questions so that we can answer them for you today. Next slide, please. So the first document that I'd like to talk about is the written narrative explaining how the funds will be used. This document goes hand in hand with the numerical budget. It's really an explanation of the budget and the assumptions that actually drive the budget numbers. I'm just pulling up some more detail about this particular slide. So if we can go to, oh, thank you, Ethan. I was going to ask him to go to the larger handout. So as you can see, what we want you to do is explain to us how you're going to use your grant funds. So in our example, the grant amount totals $25,000. For this particular entrepreneur, they expect to spend $3,000 in rent to cover rent for 1 month, and they tell us that their monthly rent is $3,000. Next, They're saying that they would like to use a portion of the grant funds for the state licensing fees, and they anticipate that the cost would be $6,000. So as opposed to just simply writing down $6,000, they tell us that it's going to be specifically for state licensing fees. And that's very helpful when you are completing your budget. And it also helps our underwriters understand how you're going to spend the money. The next category this entrepreneur is seeking assistance with is legal assistance. And they anticipate that the cost is going to be $5,000. And what type of legal assistance they're going to need? Well, they need help negotiating their partnership agreements, and also they need help developing their employee handbook and making sure that it's in compliance. So they anticipate working with a lawyer to help them accomplish these things. Next, they talk a little bit about regulatory compliance. And what they'd like help with is using $7,000 to buy a business insurance policy. So no, they give us the cost, and they not only just tell us that it's for insurance, but they tell us for what type of insurance they anticipate spending the funding for. And then the final category is capital improvement. So this is a retail dispensary, and they need to add storage to their current location. So they've done some research and they figured out that the type of storage unit that they want to buy. And then they tell us that they anticipate that the storage unit is going to cost $4,000. So they're going to use $4,000 of the grant funds to cover the build out costs associated with adding storage to their current location. Next slide, please. So, I'm sorry, my apologies. So I'd like to pause now and take questions from the audience. And Ethan, if you wouldn't mind putting back the Word document with the budget narrative, that would be great. Thank you. So if we have any questions from the audience, or if you've put questions in the chat that you would like us to go through now, this would be a great time. So Catherine, if you see any questions in the chat specifically related to the budget, if you want to ask those now, I'd be happy to address them. Or if we have people raising hands, that's also wonderful as well.
Okay, so far, I don't have a budget question. Actually, I do have a budget question, but I'd like to start with some general seed questions, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so we had an attendee ask if the grant is taxable.
Yes, absolutely. The grant is considered taxable income, and DCR will issue the grant recipients the necessary tax documentation. In fact, when you go through the underwriting process, you will be required to, once your grant application has been approved, you will be required to submit a W-9 with your address as to where you're filing your tax documents and your name and your social security number. The reason we're requesting the W-9 is because we do have to report the income as taxable income, and you will receive tax documents associated with that. Great, thank you. That was a great question.
Yes. And also, here's another good question. So the question is, why would someone apply for $10,000 when they can have $25,000?
Excellent question. Well, you have to meet the criteria for each grant program. There are different eligibility criteria for each grant. The first seed grant of 1.0, which is for the $25,000, is only available to phase 3 retail round 1 applicants. These are applicants that have received that designation by DCR, and they're actually listed in a database. And so we know who these applicants are. So if you've met the qualification, please do apply for the $25,000. Now, Seed 2.0 is available to verified social equity applicants who have met certain milestones. So first, if you have been deemed eligible for further processing, you are eligible for $5,000. If second, you have received a notice of local compliance underway, then you're eligible for an additional $5,000. So that would be $10,000 total. If you are not sure where you are with respect to these milestones, please reach out to your licensing analyst. Everyone who's applying for a license in Los Angeles should have been assigned a licensing analyst, and they can help you determine which of these criteria you actually have met and can qualify for with respect to the grant funding. Thank you.
Okay, and we have another question. Is the seed grant program strictly for phase 3 round 1 applicants? And are there going to be opportunities for individuals applying for phase 3 round 2?
Great, excellent question. Seed 1.0, the 25,000 is only available to phase 3 round 1 applicants. Other applicants are eligible for 2.0, that's the $5,000 for if you've been deemed eligible for further processing, and the additional $5,000 if you have received notice of local compliance underway. So if you meet the 2.0 milestones, if you meet both of them, you can qualify for the full $10,000. And again, I think it's important to say that people who are eligible for seed 1.0, the 25,000, cannot apply for seed 2.0. And people who are eligible for 2.0 are not allowed to apply for 1.0. I think that's an important distinction. Thank you.
All right, I have another important question. Do I need to pay the grant money back?
Excellent question. No, this is a grant and not a loan. The grant money is something that you get to keep. The one caveat or negative some people believe with the grant money is that it is taxable. So you will be required to pay taxes on the grant amount based upon your tax return, but you do not have to pay it back.
Right. And another general question, does the social equity applicant apply as an individual person or with their business entity?
So if you are applying for the grant funding, you need to apply for the funding as an individual. Grant funds through this program are only available to individual applicants. You cannot apply as a business. Great question.
Okay, and we have another question, general seed question. From the time of submission of the required documents, what is the time frame that the applicant will get confirmation if the application is complete? And then once the application is considered complete, then what's the time frame for disbursement of funds?
So the second question is easier for me to answer than the first question. So let me start with the easy one. Once an application has been approved and is complete, we anticipate that the timing to receive disbursement of the grant funds is 4 to 6 weeks. The prior question is the more important question. Everyone works at their own pace. We absolutely have a team that I've introduced you to there to support you, but how quickly you get your documents done is really a decision that's driven by you. How long it takes you to do your business executive summary, how long it takes you to do your budget narrative, how long it takes you to do your budget. So that really is driven by you and your pace, and the pace at which you can get the information and the pace that you feel comfortable submitting the documents. That said, again, we view ourselves as business coaches, so we really want you to submit documents, and we will work with you to improve the documents to the extent that they have some gaps and you need help with some specific answers. So I would say don't wait to complete your application. Go online, complete the application as soon as possible. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Submit your application as soon as possible. Our underwriting team will help you get to a complete application. Once the application has been approved, we anticipate that the funding disbursement will take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Great.
All right. Okay, Paula, so we do have questions about the written budget narrative. Can you use seed money to help secure a location in addition to the first month's rent?
I would say that you can definitely use seed grant money to pay your rent without question.
Okay, and then can the budget narrative show past expenses that the applicant has already paid for, or only future 12 months of expenses?
Excellent, excellent question. At this point, we're only allowing people to use the grant funding for future expenses. I do think this question has come up at different times, and it's something that we can take under advisement. But at this point, we've decided that the expenses can only be, the grant funding rather, can only be used for future expenses. But if that is something that we should probably take under advisement and make a decision around if you can use the grant funding for expenses that you have incurred in the past.
Okay, and those are the questions I have for now. I think we can move on, and if we continue to get questions, we'll continue to, ask further along in the webinar.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Go back to the presentation. Excellent. Oh, I should have. So the next thing we'd like to talk to you about is the budget itself. This is probably the most critical part of your grant application. The first thing is we want to make sure that the amount of the budget totals the requested grant funding amount. One of the things that we've seen in application, if people have had the opportunity to write a full business plan and they've been submitting their budget associated with their business plan. And what we actually need to see is a budget associated with the grant funding amount. So if you're applying for 25,000, your budget should total 25,000. The reason this is a critical distinction is we are required to report back to the state specifically how the grant funding was used. And so therefore our numbers need to tie out to the numbers the amount of state funding that was provided to the city of LA for the social equity grant program. So that's why we need to make sure that the budget that's approved as a part of your application totals the grant amount that you're receiving. So this is an example of the budget associated with the budget narrative that I just talked you through. So you can see that the rent was $3,000. The regulatory compliance fees was $6,000. That was their insurance. Their legal assistance, they needed help, remember, with their partnership, as well as developing their employee manual. That number was $5,000. The state licensing fees was $7,000. Actually, I mixed that up. The state licensing fees was $6,000 and the insurance was $7,000. My apologies. And then finally, remember, we talked about the fact that they needed $4,000 to build out a storage unit in that space. And you can see that on line 16. So if you add all these numbers together, 3 plus 6 plus 5 plus 7 plus 4, that totals $25,000. And that is the amount that they are applying for as a part of their grant application. Do we have any questions at this point about the quantitative part of the budget? You guys got this, huh?
Yes. We do have a question. We have a question about the budget spreadsheet. Okay, so if someone submitted an application and they need to revise the budget, how can they do that? And there's a little bit of specifics. So they recently had an inspection of the premises, and some of the items on the budget have already been paid for. So the person would need to add and delete items on the spreadsheet.
Yes, that's a wonderful question. And that's the role of the underwriter. That's why, I think it's important to remember that this application process isn't just an online application process. There's a human being involved. We are business coaches that can help you make adjustments. We give advice on how we think, you might better spend the money. We'll help remind you what you're not eligible to use the money for. All of that requires human interaction. So please submit your budget and contact your underwriter. And if you want to make a change in your budget before it's submitted for final approval and grant disbursement, that's why we have Tiffany and Laura and Stacy and Bruce to help you. Absolutely talk to your underwriter and they can help you make the appropriate adjustments. Thank you. Is there another budget question?
I'm searching, and I do not see a budget question at this time.
Okay, excellent. And I do see some hands raised, so I assume that those questions are being answered. And if you feel like your question has been answered, please feel free to lower your hand. If it hasn't been answered, please either put it in the chat or keep your hand raised and we will make sure we get to you. I think there's another question that just came up. Catherine, do you see that one?
I'm sorry.
I'm on
no.
I think I can go ahead and take this one. So why don't I jump in? So it says our startup costs are going to be around $200,000 and the grant is only $25,000. Is it okay to show all the expenses? I think that we need to see a budget that totals $25,000, even if that's not the full amount of startup costs that you need. So what I would do is work with your underwriter to select which expenses you're going to cover with the $25K versus which expenses would be covered through external resources or your own personal resources, it looks like it would total 175. But yes, we do need you to choose the specific line items totaling $25,000 that you will be using the grant money for.
Thank you, Paula. We do have another budget question now.
Great.
What if all of the $25,000 will be used for one item, just one cost?
Yes, excellent question. And that's fine. We just need you to tell us in the budget narrative what that one cost is and why the cost is $25,000, and just explain qualitatively how the money will be used. That's why we request both the qualitative budget narrative to accompany the quantitative budget Excel spreadsheet. Great question.
And I think we can move along. And if there are any other budget questions, we can get back to those.
Okay, perfect. So do we want to move to the next assessment document? And Ethan, if you could go back to the slides, that would be great. Okay, monthly projections. So the monthly projection spreadsheet is a document that requires you to upload the information in an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets format. And so I think it's important to pause and just reflect on the fact that one of the most critical aspects of running a business is making sure you don't run out of cash. And one of the things that you always have to be mindful of is what is the timing of your revenues coming in the door versus the timing of when you have to actually make these expenditures. So one of the ways to ensure that you don't run out of cash is by having an understanding of how much money you want to spend, not all at once, but over time. So what we would like for people to do is to create a monthly expense projection using our template. This document gives you an opportunity to lay out your budget in a time-sensitive manner. So for example, if you're applying for $25,000 in grant funds and you're spending $3,000 in rent, do you want to spend that rent money in month 1, month 2, or month 3? So let's say you decide to spend it in month 3, then you would add $3,000 in column G9, and that would be your rent money for month 3. Now, let's assume you'll pay $6,000 of your grant funds to your state licensing for your state licensing fees. But perhaps your state licensing fee is not due until month 6. So you would take that $6,000 and you would enter that amount in month 6, in the month 6 column. So in this particular spreadsheet, it would be in cell J22. Now, continuing with our illustration, let's say you're buying general liability insurance for $7,000, but you actually just paid that bill last month, and it's an annual bill because it's an annual policy. So you probably wouldn't need to spend that additional $7,000 until next year, which from a cash flow perspective would show up in month 12. So you would go over to month 12 and you would find the general liability insurance line, and then you would enter that in the appropriate cell in month 12. So in this case, it's cell Q29. Now, in our final illustration of the monthly expense projection, let's look at the capital improvement category. Now, remember from the budget narrative and from the sample budget, you, the entrepreneur, wanted to create a new $4,000 storage unit for your business. You actually want to build the storage unit for your business, but before you can even build it, you have to work with an architect to design the storage unit and the shelving plans. So you might spend months 1 and 2 designing the space, but you actually don't have to spend the money for this physical storage unit until month 3, because months 1 and 2 were the design phase. So using this example, you would put the storage unit costs of $4,000 in the month 3 column. Finally, the last step of projecting your monthly expenses is for you to add all of your monthly expenses for each category, going from month 1 to month 12, and enter the sum in the last column, the final row, column Q, and that should total the $25,000 budget number that you provided in your sample budget, as well as what you discussed in your budget narrative Word document. So to add all of your expenses in column Q going down, you would sum the total in the final column, and then you also need to sum the row in the final row. And if you're applying for a $25,000 grant, your total expenses in column Q should total $25,000. So as you can see on the screen, the total appears in column Q, row 41. And if this is at all confusing for you, definitely work with your underwriter to make sure that this is complete. We want to, again, we're here to help you, and we want to make this process as fast and as simple as possible. Thank you for the magic hands entering the numbers on the spreadsheet. That was very helpful. So do we have any questions about creating the monthly expense projections?
Thank you, Paula. I am looking specifically for the monthly projection questions, and I don't see.
Okay.
I don't
No
see any.
No problem. Again, I would encourage you to use the documents that you received when you registered for this webinar, and maybe just jot down some notes for yourself, personal, coaching spreadsheet, and you would be able to talk with whatever notes you gathered from the seminar with your underwriter, and they can help you either complete the spreadsheet or tell you ways to improve it. And you may actually be already done, and that's even more wonderful. But we just want to let you know that we're here to help.
Okay, but Paula, I do have another question, a general seed question, and that is, what's the best way to contact and work with the underwriter?
The first thing you need to do is actually complete an application, because you will not be assigned an underwriter until we've received a completed application. So go to our website, elevateimpactla.com, complete the application that you qualify for, whether it's the Seed 1.0, that's one application, versus Seed 2.0, which is a separate application. Complete the application, upload the assessment documents, and once that has happened, you will be assigned an underwriter. And you'll hear from either me or Stacy or the underwriter directly that you've been assigned to work with.
And Paula, how do they find out who their assigned underwriter is?
Once they've completed an application, Stacy and I work together to figure out which underwriter has availability to work with that individual, and then we will assign the underwriter from there, and the underwriter will reach out to the person once they've been assigned, to the applicant once they've been assigned.
Thank you. And I do have a budget question.
Okay.
So after the funds are dispersed based on the budget submitted with the application, does the applicant have to turn in receipts or documents to show where the $25,000 went to on the budget, exactly as it was submitted on the budget?
So yes, the applicant does have to upload receipts showing where they spent the money. Now, we understand that this is entrepreneurial and it's hard to predict the future. So if the expenses don't exactly line up with what you said or you thought you were going to spend in the budget, that's not a problem. But you do have to spend money on eligible uses of proceeds. So, for example, you are not allowed to purchase inventory or cannabis flower with grant funds. So when you submit your receipts, you're not allowed to submit a receipt for cannabis inventory. And we'll talk a little bit more about the post-grant disbursement process, but we are going to be collecting receipts as evidence of how you've spent the money, and those receipts will be reported back to the state on an aggregate basis for the city of LA. Great question. Thank you for that.
Another monthly expense projections question.
Sure.
Are the examples in the budget item presented all allowable?
Yes, those are all allowable expenses.
And can seed monies be used? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Can seed monies be used to pay for application modification fees?
I'm not sure what application modification fees are, but if you'll notice on the budget, there is a line item for permitting and licensing fees. So talk with your underwriter about specifically what that is, and we can figure out which category it falls in. But a large percentage of the budget is anticipated to be used for regulatory compliance. And so I'm not quite sure what application modification fees, but if they fall under the category of permitting and regulatory compliance, then yes, you would be able to use the money for that. But I would encourage you to speak with your underwriting about that more specifically. And again, that's the important of not just simply putting a number on a spreadsheet, but you will be able to explain qualitatively why it does meet the regulatory compliance perspective. Thank you.
Yes. And just to add on, yes, they can use Sea Grant monies to pay for application modification fees.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Monthly expenses. Will only the expenses relating to the grant, do you only itemize the expenses related to the grant, or do you need to see all of the business expenses projections for the first year?
Well, I will tell you this. We need to see the monthly expenses associated with the grant, and we need to see a budget associated with the grant. Now, if you have already done monthly expense projections for your entire business for the entire year, go ahead and submit that monthly projection, and I applaud you for having already done that work. And we can work with the underwriter to figure out which line items we want to pull out specifically for this grant budget. But please submit what you have, and we will we will work with you to call out what the $25,000 number would be for, and which, what's the timing going to be on the monthly cash flows. So don't hesitate to submit the budget. We can help you figure that out. Thank you.
Okay. And now, do we pay for underwriting for assistance? Are there any charges for your service?
No, this is all a part of the grant administration document, and the grant document, or I'm sorry, contract is the word I'm looking for. The grant contract with the City of Los Angeles. All of our underwriting and technical assistance and business coaching is free. Thank you so much for answering that question, because I know that there are a lot of consultants that people feel obligated to work with. But I would say this to you: try us first. And if you don't feel that our services are enough for what you need, then please, by all means, hire a consultant. But I would say try us first, and we will try to help you through the underwriting process, because it is free. And that way you can use all of your grant funding for your business and not have to pay consultants. But start with us, and if you feel you need more help, you're more than welcome to work with a consultant.
Great. And I have a general question here.
Sure.
Because the application must be completed by an individual and not a company, does that mean that each owner of one company is able to apply?
No, only the verified social, I'm getting an echo. Only the verified social equity applicant can apply for the funding. That is one of the constraints put on to us by the state of California. This grant funding is only allowed to go to verified social equity applicants. Okay.
Okay. I think we can move along.
The slides, excellent. Where are we? I think we're on the business plan. Okay, business executive summary. Let me start by saying we are not looking for a full-blown business plan. Again, we want to make this as easy for you as possible. So what we're looking for is a business executive summary, which is basically a shortened version of your business plan. We want to understand more about the type of business you're running, how you anticipate acquiring customers, what type of product you're developing, and how you're going to market your services. We expect that the business executive summary to be a short document of only 3 to 5 pages. And some people who have written a full business plan, you may only need to submit your executive summary. And finally, I need to say, if you have written a full business plan, please go ahead and submit it. We don't want to create rework. please submit it. Even if it's 100 pages, it absolutely will qualify. But if you haven't done a full business plan, a business executive summary is all you need. All of the questions that are outlined in this business executive summary example may not apply to your business, but we do want you to describe all that you can to the best of your ability. So now let's walk through this document in a little more detail. Section 1, the overview section is where you enter the company information. This includes your name, your website, your company description of 50 words or less. And if you have a slogan or a tagline, this would be the right place to enter that type of information. The next section, product questions. These questions are specifically designed to help you describe the type of product that you're bringing to market. We want you to describe your product, or maybe it's a service. Please write down the top features of the products and the benefits of those products and services. Then tell us how much money you will require to set up and develop your product. The next section of the business plan is the competition section. Now, we all know that being in the cannabis industry can be a very competitive marketplace. We just want to understand if you're aware of who your competition is and who your top 3 competitors are. And most importantly, how are you going to be unique? How are you going to distinguish yourself from your competition? The next section of the business plan, or the business executive summary rather, are the marketing and sales questions. So once you've developed your product, a critical question that all businesses have to ask is, how are you actually going to get that product in the hands of your customers? The next section addresses your staff. A successful business often requires a team. We'd like to understand who's on your team, including your business partners and consultants. If you have a staff, they're going to cost you money. Or if you're working with a consultant, they will also cost you money. So you have the opportunity in this section to explain who the individuals are, what their responsibilities are, and what you anticipate paying them. The next section of the business executive summary walks you through some infrastructure questions. These relate to the physical attributes of your business. So they relate to the things that you're going to have to spend money on to help set up your business. For example, you might have to spend money on construction to bring your facility into compliance. You may have to purchase equipment, whether it's computers or might even be packaging equipment. Other example include security systems, phones, or you may have to spend money on a lease. The next section we talk through is the compliance questions section. We all know that the cannabis industry is highly regulated, and there are a number of costs associated with making sure that you stay in compliance. So the first question is, what type of cannabis business are you actually operating? Do you need to provide health insurance to your employees as a part of your labor peace agreement? Do you need to purchase general liability insurance? This is the section where you would be able to address all of those questions. And notice that in each one of these sections, I've been wrapping into costs. And so if you're trying to think about what cost to put on your budget or what cost to explain in your budget narrative, this business plan executive summary and this template of questions can help you do that. So if you find that you need insurance because one of your, I don't know, maybe your business partner or you're doing a joint venture requires that you set up general liability insurance, well, you would explain that partnership relationship in the compliance section, and then you would put the costs associated with getting that policy into your budget spreadsheet, and then you would explain in the budget narrative that your business partner requires that you set up general liability insurance. So you see all of these documents work together, and they're very integrated. And that's to us how you build a holistic viewpoint of how to launch and grow your business. Finally, being in business requires that you stay in action. So we would like for you to upload your action plan. This plan describes what you need to do next in order to be successful and to make sure that you're launching a long-term sustainable business. So in this part of the business plan, we want you to list out what you think are the milestones for yourself. These milestones might include things like secure funding, create design plans, build out your space, purchase furniture, or develop a logo. Here in this section, you have the opportunity to list all of the action items in your business plan. I kind of think of this section as the to-do list. And it just helps you, plan and think ahead about what steps you need to take and which order you should be taking those steps. So that's how we think about the business executive summary. Did we have any questions on this particular document? Yeah, no, not on that particular document, but we're receiving
several questions around a couple of topics. So I wondered if you could please describe the turnaround time again from when someone applies through disbursement of the funds.
Again, there's two parts to the application process. The first part is the time it takes you to complete a full application. And I can't predict how quickly some people can complete a full application. We've had some people do it, we had business plans, we had completed applications, uploaded literally the first day after we launched. And then we also are still getting applications on a weekly basis. So everybody's different. Now, once your application has been assessed and approved, and that process is an iterative process where you'll be working closely with our underwriters to make sure that there are no gaps and that you've answered all the questions appropriately. And just to be fair, folks, we actually have in other cities, people have uploaded applications and what they're doing is uploading blank pieces of paper, right? So that's not acceptable. So we literally have to go back to them and say, I don't know if this was intentional, but we really do need you to upload a budget. And so that's why we have this assessment process to make sure that people are uploading content in line with industry standards. So once an application has been approved, we expect that the turnaround time to disperse the grant dollars will be about 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm going to talk to you in the next section of the presentation, like what actually happens once a fully approved application has been received. And we'll talk through the grant disbursement process.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question. The applicant would like to know, what if their investors are paying for everything?
I've been an investor for most of my life. I actually started my career in venture capital and private equity investor. And if your investors are smart, they never say no to money. They absolutely would encourage you to apply for the grant program because being an entrepreneur, it's very difficult to predict all of the twists and turns. I mean, the best example I can give you is the COVID pandemic. No one predicted that we would be in a pandemic situation. That led to a lot of lost revenue and a lot of increased costs for small businesses. And so if they had extra cash on hand or a cash cushion, which perhaps this grant funding can provide for you, we absolutely, as an investor, would encourage you to apply.
Thank you, Paula. All right, now can the funds be dispersed to a holding company controlled by the applicant, or do the funds have to be dispersed in the applicant's individual name? They're really asking this question in regards to tax liability.
The grant funds have to be dispersed to the individual name. That is a requirement.
Okay, and we have another question. Can the $25,000 grant be applied to the company for tax purposes and not a W-9 for an individual?
Unfortunately, the grant funds have to be dispersed to an individual.
Okay. And I have a few general questions, and I think it bears worth repeating. If you could please talk about the SEED program qualifications. Who is eligible for grant funds, for which grant funds?
Sure. So the SEED 1.0, the 25,000, is open to people who have met the qualification as a phase 3 retail round 1 retailer. The SEED 2.0 can be dispersed in 2 different tranches. The first tranche is when you meet the requirements for, I'm just looking for my notes because I don't want to misstate the, okay, the first $5,000 can be dispersed when the Department of Cannabis Revenue approves your license application or approves your pre-application for further processing. You can then receive an additional $5,000 when you are eligible for a notice of local compliance underway. These 2 categories, if you have questions about whether or not you meet those qualifications, please contact your licensing analyst.
Okay.
Okay,
That's what I have for now.
great. So why don't we go back to the slides and maybe I can talk about the grant disbursement process. So once all of your documents have been uploaded, the underwriters use this grant assessment checklist just to make sure that they've reviewed each document, and they just keep track of whether or not the document is complete or incomplete. If it's incomplete, you will receive coaching and feedback about how to complete the assessment document so that it's in line with the industry standards that are being expected of you for this particular grant application. Next slide. Okay, step 3, grant approval. So, pardon me, step 3, grant approval. Okay, after review by the Elevate Impact Grant Committee, an application passes and the application passes the assessment process, an email is sent to the applicant saying that they passed and now they are deemed a approved applicant. Again, if you do not pass, the entrepreneur will work with the underwriter and be coached on how to improve their application so that they can reapply. Next slide. Virtual signing. So after approval, a grant agreement is created for that specific approved applicant, and the Elevate Impact staff will virtually meet with the applicant to review the documents and address any questions about the grant agreement. The grant agreement will ask approved applicants to confirm that they understand the approved use of funds, and they are obviously submitting a budget outlining those expenses. And that's what we talked about previously with the budget narrative and the budget Excel document. After the approved applicant has reviewed and e-signed the documents, the City of Los Angeles will also electronically sign the documents. Next slide. Grant disbursement. So in order to receive the grant funds, we will be dispersing funds through ACH transfer. So you will be required to set up an account at elevateimpactfunds.com. You will work with your underwriter to set up the account, and all of this will be addressed during the closing process. Approved applicants will then provide their banking information, and as a way to confirm that the money is going to the correct account, you will receive micro deposits to confirm that the money has been sent to the intended recipient. Once you confirm that you've received those micro deposits, and once the grant agreement has been signed by you, by Director Packer and the city attorney, then you will receive the grant funds. Next slide, please. This slide provides you with an overview of the approved uses of funds. These are also detailed for you on the budget spreadsheet that we already talked through, but this is just a summary of the approved uses of funds. Next slide. And then we also, of course, with any approved list, there's the unapproved list. So this is a list of what you are not allowed to use the grant funds for. You cannot allow it for unlicensed, you cannot use the funds for unlicensed cannabis industry. It cannot be used on businesses, non-cannabis businesses that serve the cannabis industry. You cannot buy inventory. You cannot use it for personal expenses, such as the purchase of personal cars or homes. You cannot use the money to relend or to invest in other businesses, and you cannot use the money to engage in prohibited operations. Next slide. Post-grant disbursement, that's step 6. Grant recipients will be required to upload receipts detailing how they actually spent the money. And we understand that sometimes there's a gap between what you said you were going to spend it on versus what you actually spent it on. But remember, we're not concerned about the gap so much as it is you cannot use the grant funds on the unapproved expenses that we just talked through on the previous slide. Next slide, please. The one thing I'd like to say is with regards to the post data collection, I want to once again remind you that the state requires that we report on how entrepreneurs spent their grant funds. Therefore, grant recipients will be required to upload their receipt as evidence of grant expenditures. This is also a very important coachable moment for anyone who's ever engaged in entrepreneurial activities before. This allows the Elevate Impact team to work with you to review actual expenses versus budgeted items. And then we can help you examine discrepancies and what can be learned about how to improve the management of your business. So it's not only about reporting to the state, but it's also a very strong entrepreneurial training tool as we work with you to help you manage your budget and your cash flow going forward. Next slide. So I think that concludes the bulk of the presentation. And now I would love to open it up to the audience for some additional questions.
As we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I just wanted to talk a little bit about your ACA reference number. There are some questions about that. And so the ACA reference number, that comes from your Acela account. If you log into Acela and you look under My Account, that is your reference number. And that's the number that you would use to fill out your seed grant application.
And just, if I could ask a question, I think that most of the ACA reference numbers begin with a 3. Am I right about that, Catherine? Was that?
I can't say all of them, but a lot of them, the majority.
Okay.
But that is correct. Sometimes it might be a little bit confusing because there's an application number. So there's a number that's tied to an application. You can have every application you fill out will have an application number. And so you can have multiple application numbers, but each user, each person will have only one ACA reference number.
Great. And we have had applications come in where people have submitted their LA record number instead of their ACA application number, and which is fine because obviously behind the scenes we can do a little bit of digging. So, you know, don't let that hold you up. If you can't remember your ACA number or you can't find it, go ahead and submit your application and we can help find it for you. That's one of the roles that Stacy, our database manager, does, is help, you know, match up the right identity, the verified social equity applicant, with the right number. And Catherine was right to explain that there is an ACA number and then there's a LA record number. And those two numbers you might have, and you may not understand the difference between the two, but we can help you figure that out.
Okay, let's see if I can find some hands.
Sure, and I do see some questions that maybe I can answer while you are looking for additional hands. So one question I think bears repeating. The question says, we only itemize expenses. Do we only itemize expenses related to the grant, or do you need to see all of my business expense projections for the first year? So you only need to itemize expenses related to the grant. However, if you do have expense projections for the first year and you want us to help you figure out which ones you want to apply to the grant, we can help you do that. So don't let that be a holdup for submitting an application. Go ahead and submit your full budget and we'll work with you to identify which of those expenses you want to use specifically for the grant application. Dr. Brown, I don't know if you are, is she still available?
Yes,
Well, maybe-
yes, Paula. Yes, I'm here.
There's a question that I would love for you to address if you can. It deals with the August 31st deadline. So it says that if all of the funding is not dispersed, the rest of the money will be spent among the applicants who applied. Is that correct? So can you explain that process about what happens if all of the money has not been dispersed by August 31?
That goes directly to our contract with the state. We have a deadline to disperse funds And if we are not in compliance with that, we have to send money back to the state. So in order for us not to have to send any unused or undispersed dollars, we've calculated that August 19th is the 90-day deadline. And so if you have not applied by August 18th, you will not be eligible to get any further dollars. But if you have applied by August 18th, then you would be in line to get more dollars or get the 25,000 or the 5 or 10K based on that time frame. We will, whatever monies that have not been dispersed by August 18th is going to be redistributed, whatever those dollars are left, to all folks who have applied already. Does that make sense? We are under contract to disperse dollars within a certain period of time per our contract with the state. And the August 18th date goes in line with the 90 days prior to the end of our contract. So we did that so that we have 3 months to redistribute any unused dollars before the end of the contract runs out.
Great, thank you. That was very clear. I have found another question that I think I can answer. It says, if we are just social equity verified, how do we fill in the blanks regarding our business name? You don't have to. If you don't have a business name yet, remember, these funds are going to individuals. So you can simply skip that or put none. And no, you don't have to register with the state of California regarding the SEED 2.0 application, because again, the grant funds are going to individuals and not businesses.
Okay. We also had a question that I will answer. It says, we haven't received an ACA number. How do I get my number? So we will be putting links to the video tutorials about how to find your ACA number, reference number, into this chat on the webinar. And the tutorials are also located on DCR's website on how to find your ACA number. Okay. And here's a question for you, Paula.
Sure.
Can we use grant money to pay back for debits? For example, if we paid rent for June by borrowing money, can I pay the person back the money borrowed? Or are funds only to be used for future expenses?
Great question. At this point, funds are only to be used for future expenses. I also worry that repaying debt kind of falls under the umbrella of relending or investing, and that actually is not an eligible use of funds. So I would have to say no at this point, that you can only use funds for future expenses. Obviously, we can take it under advisement, but at this point, the policy of the program is that you can only use funds for future expenses.
Thank you. Next question. Go ahead.
Well, I just saw a question that is an excellent one, and I just want to address it. It says, when one of our underwriters contacts us for additional documents, do we send them directly to them or her, or upload them to Elevate? We would prefer, if your underwriter requests a specific document, that you send it to them directly. You will have their email address. What happens when you upload them to Elevate, it creates a duplicate application, which can be confusing for the underwriter. So if you already have that underwriter relationship, feel free to send the documents to them directly. Now, if you prefer to upload them to Elevate, absolutely do that. We will figure it out. It's not a problem, but I do want to say it's a more efficient process for you to send them to your underwriter directly.
Okay.
Paula, I have a question that I've received from several applicants.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about and address for those who have used a consultant, what process needs to happen when they have somebody who has uploaded the documents on their behalf, and when it comes time for disbursement, what needs to happen?
Yes, excellent question. We were just talking about this in our team call this morning. The social equity, the grant dollars can only go directly to the social equity individual. So if you've been working with a consultant or a preparer, and one of the things that we have to verify is your identity. So through that Zoom call that we talked about earlier, or video call, because we tend to use Google Meet, but when you have that closing video call with your underwriter, you have to verify your identity by showing us your driver's license. And also we want to confirm that you have an open bank account that we can send the funds to. One of the other things we do is when we draft the grant agreement, there's a section which asks for a mailing address to receive legal notices. And in that section, we ask you for your mailing address as well as your email. That email is then tied to the Elevate Impact Funds account where your funding will be dispersed. So that email address has to be the address of the social equity individual. We have had applicants use their preparer email, and unfortunately, we cannot send the dollars to the preparer or the consultant. The dollars have to go to the social equity individual, and that individual will be verified in the closing video call, as well as through the confirmation of the social equity applicant's email address, driver's license, and bank account. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Excellent question.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay, and we did receive a question of wondering if this presentation will be available on the DCR website, and the answer is yes. Almost, I know by the end of the day, we will have a link to this webinar for viewing in the future. It'd probably be available almost directly after this presentation.
Great.
All
And I do
right.
see a question.
Great.
What if the investors are paying for everything, and what would be the correct way to prepare the budget and business summary to receive the funds? So again, I think that investors always welcome more money into the company than less. So what you would do is you would take the budget that you prepared for your investors, and you would select which of those line items you would use the grant funding for. So to give you an example, let's say that you need to buy insurance for your business, and the insurance for the type of business that you're running is $50,000. Well, you could write a budget narrative that says our entire insurance is $50,000. However, I'm going to use $10,000 of the grant funds to pay for a portion of the total insurance cost. And you would simply just explain that in your budget narrative, and that would be an acceptable use of funds for the grant. Okay.
Thank you. We do have a question about the application process.
Sure.
The applicant would like to know how far into the application process for our business must we be in order to apply for the grant. So in other words, what's required?
So I think what's required is that you meet the milestones that we talked about a little bit earlier in the presentation. To receive the $25,000, you have to have received the Phase 3 Retail 101 designation by DCR's office. To apply for the first $5,000, you have to receive a notice that your application is eligible for further processing. And then to receive the second $5,000, you have to have received the notice for compliance underway. So it's not about necessarily the stage of your business, but instead it's about, have you met the milestones that the Department of Cannabis Revenue has set aside for these particular grant funds?
Great. Oh, we have a great question. Is there a deadline to use the grant money?
For the company to use the grant money? No.
Right. So once,
right. You just have to have applied and received the grant money by, well, you have to have applied and been approved for the grant money by August 31st.
August 18th.
I'm sorry, August 8th. Thank you, Dr. Brown. August 18th. That's my mother's birthday. How could I forget that?
Okay.
so there's no deadline for them to use the grant funds.
No, they just have to have received the disbursement.
Okay.
Paula, I want to just correct that they need to have applied by August 18th, not to have received the dollars, but have applied.
Right, because of the delay in terms of getting the grant agreement.
Yes,
signed. Yeah.
yes. As long as they've applied by August 18th, they're good to go.
Great, perfect.
Oh, I have another
Well,
great
Dr.
question.
Brown, I'm sorry, just another clarification. Applied or approved?
You know, let me think about that. because that's
Yeah.
a process, right? I would
Exactly.
probably say approved. Wouldn't you say, Paula, approved? And, that means they've uploaded all their documents and so forth and so on. So let's say approved.
The reason I think it's important to say approved is you do have a lot of false starts. People start applications and then they
Yes.
realize they haven't met the licensing milestones. And so I think approved is a better metric.
I agree. Thank you for that.
And Catherine, I think you found another question.
I did. So an applicant would like to know, after I'm verified, can I designate someone that you can work with to gather any additional information needed?
Sure, we believe in a team approach. Absolutely. If there are people on your team that you think are qualified to help complete the assessment documents, absolutely, you are welcome to delegate. That's your discretion. But when it comes to once you've been approved and you go through the closing process, that has to be the verified social equity individual. You have to participate in the closing process. You have to sign the closing documents. We will be using your verified equity applicant's email address to disperse the funds. Okay. And really, we want to make sure this money is going for the people that it was intended, right? We're really trying to prevent any sort of fraud. We're trying to prevent any sort of people being hijacked and taking and having their identities taken advantage of. That's why it's very important for us to build a direct relationship with the verified social equity applicant when dispersing the funds.
And I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the phone number that people can call if they still have questions? They're afraid they might forget by the time they complete the application.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. We do have a contact site, contact us on our website, and we find that is the best way to ask questions because that allows us to filter the question to the person whose expertise or to the person who has the expertise to answer the question. So I'm a little bit suggesting or encouraging people to type their question into the website as opposed to leaving a phone message, because phone messages can get lost so easily. And phone messages, it's hard to direct them to the right person.
All right. Oh, and while we were discussing, we have a budget question.
Great.
Great. So the attendee says, I'm going to apply for the $10,000 grant to use towards my rent of $6,750 per month while I await my license for distribution. Can I use the full $10,000 towards 1.5 amount of rent? Oh, towards 1.5 amount of rent.
Yes, absolutely. Again, you just have to explain that. In certain instances, the underwriter may ask you to show your lease or something as evidence that you have the rent agreement in place, but the full answer is yes, you can absolutely use all of the grant money for budget. We just need you to explain that in your budget narrative and provide some sort of justification.
And I see a question, if people have, they want to know if they have further questions, can they still call DCR? Yes, DCR is still available for phone calls. But I have to tell you, a lot of this information is, actually all of this information is on our website, LA Cannabis. And it's also on the SEED Elevate Impact, it's elevateimpactla.com, the SEED website. Okay. These were some excellent questions that were asked. Let's see if I can see any more that we haven't covered. Okay, here's an interesting question. The applicant would like to purchase LED lights. what justification would they need for this capital purchase?
I think lighting does indeed fall under equipment. And so therefore you would just have to explain, the fact that you're using it for LED lights and just explain that it's capital equipment for your space. But that is an approved use of proceeds.
Thank you. So we still have a little time. Are there any more questions about the SEED grant program?
So here's a question I think is interesting. Should budgets be submitted with a contingency line in case additional funding is made available? I would encourage you to go ahead and specify what each line item was going to be, simply because of the reporting requirements to the state. We are going to have to report how you use the specific money. So it would be very difficult to report to the state a contingency line, because that's not specific enough. So I would encourage you to go ahead and submit a budget without the contingency. I hope that helps. Okay, great. Well, I would love in the last few minutes, and while we're waiting for some questions, if you guys want to put into the chat where you would like, how we can improve this presentation, or where you would like us to spend more time. We're trying to do the lunch and learns on a periodic basis going forward. And if there's something that we haven't answered, maybe you'd like to see the video on the ACA number. Maybe there's some other videos you'd like us to address, but if you might just sort of put into the chat where you'd like to see us spend time in our next presentation, or the parts that you found most helpful, that would be very informative for us, so that we can customize it for the next time. Thank you.
And actually, I think our chat feature is not available. It would be Q&A.
Oh, I'm sorry, Q&A, right.
Oh, no, it's okay. And I see a question about, can SEED 2.0 be used in a cultivation or manufacturing operation, or is it just retail? And so the answer is yes, it can be used for a cultivation or a manufacturing operation, as long as you meet the requirements.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so, yes, we are going to provide this presentation, the webinar, on our website. It will be on DCR's website by the end of today.
Great. Well, really, I think the purpose of the webinar was to provide as much information as possible. We really are encouraging people to apply as quickly as possible. We are on hand to help you get through the application process with our underwriters. We don't want, to get too close to that deadline of August 18th, my mother's birthday, that Dr. Brown talked to you about. So please apply as quickly as you can, and we'll help you get through the process.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Catherine, are we good?
Very great.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ms. Groves and your team, and thank you, Catherine. Great. This was a robust and informative workshop. Just to let everybody know, this is the first in a series of our Lunch and Learns. Our next workshop webinar will be held on June 24th from 12 to 1:30. And then we have another webinar scheduled for July 1st from 12 to 1:30. So those are two more webinars that we have scheduled. And as Ms. Gross said, if you have any kind of input or any specific assessment documents that you would like her to spend more time on than something else, please indicate that in the Q&A before we leave. But we'll have other opportunities. We want to get better and better to address your needs. As a reminder, Elevate Impact, they have made themselves available to assist every applicant with completing their applications. Please use your best judgment in completing the application and don't hesitate to outreach to them. Their services are comprehensive and again, they are free. We really want to impress upon you to try to do this on your own. It's only a 3-page document and they are there to assist you. It breaks my heart to see people spending $4,000 and $5,000 on consultants when Elevate Impact is there to help you complete your application for free. That money you can use for your business. So again, we want to thank everybody for their time today and continue to register, and we will send you the assessment documents so you can have them prior to the next session. You can become familiar with them, fill them out as best you can. And, let's get this money, folks. So thank you. And Paula, do you have any closing remarks, or anybody from my team have any closing remarks before we sign off?
No, I just really applaud all of you. Being an entrepreneur is hard work, but it's fun work, it's creative work, and we're here to support you. And, don't let perfect be in the way of good enough. Apply, and we'll help you, get through the process and get the grant funding. So thank you for participating in the seminar, and we hope that it was helpful.
And again, I want to thank Allison Toll. She was hosting this, and Ethan was great on all of the slides and all of the uploading of the documents. So it takes a team, folks, to put all these together. So again, thank you to everyone and see you next time.